Welcome back to Post Credit Podcast. It's been a little while. We took a break for a week. We had some personal things come up and scheduling couldn't get it right, so we were gone last week, and then this episode is getting released a day late, again, to scheduling reasons. We're going to try and be more on track in the future, but for the time being, this is what you get. But we're back. Welcome back. I am Preston Moore, as always, joined by my co-host Raymond Vanuya. Raymond, how you doing?
It's good. Feels good to be back on the mic. I mean, yeah, it feels like it's been forever, man.
I know. Let's try to not do that again.
I know, for real.
Yeah, I feel a little bit rusty almost, but I'm glad we're back. So that being said, let's jump right in. Beginning of this podcast, we're going to talk about some of the things that we have been watching recently. It's been 2 weeks, so we each have a couple of things that we've watched in the last 2 weeks. I'll go first. I recently watched the TV series The Boys. It's an Amazon Prime original. It's really good. Basically, it centers around the premise of this movie. The premise of this series is what if superheroes were bad? Basically, they're run by this corporation, and the corporation is in charge of them. Basically, all these superheroes have a brand, and once you get to the top, it's they're very, very corrupt, and they're not who you think you are. It's basically the whole theme is never meet your heroes kind of thing, and there is a group of regular civilians who are trying to expose the superheroes for the bad people that they are. It's really, really interesting. It centers around one guy who had his girlfriend, and this isn't a spoiler, this happens in the very first episode, but it centers around one guy who his girlfriend was killed by one of these superheroes because it's a speedster superhero who runs straight through his girlfriend and kills him. It's very bloody and gross.
My Lord, that's dark.
It's shocking, and it happens in like the first 10-15 minutes of the first episode, and you're like, oh my gosh. And then the other storyline that it centers around is this up-and-coming superhero, and she's actually played by the girl who played Hope in Jessica Jones. I don't know if you remember the girl she was mind-controlled by Kilgrave to kill her parents, essentially, in that first season. So it's the same actress. She's really good in the role, but she plays a superhero who's not corrupt, who's actually pure, but she's getting kind of inducted into what they call the Seven, which is basically their version of the Justice League, and everyone else in this group, the Seven, is corrupt and bad, but she's not. So it's really interesting to see her arc throughout it as she meets all of her heroes and learns that they're not exactly who she thinks they are, and she has to kind of join their team. So I don't know. It's a really, really good show. Have you seen it? I don't think you have, right?
No, I haven't, but it's crazy. Everyone's been telling me, dude, you need to watch this show. And then they're just like, you love like dark superhero stuff, right? And I was like, yeah, of course. And they're like, then you got to watch The Boys. And I'm just like, damn, dude, all right.
If that is down your alley, you would love it. I'm telling you right now. I mean, it's extremely dark. I heard the description that was given to me before I watched it. I'd seen people raving, saying it's good, but as far as like specifics, the description that I got was it's about superheroes, but if superheroes did really bad things. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll watch it. So going into it, I thought it was going to be more like Deadpool, like funny and like lighthearted almost. And it is not. There are like a few jokes like here and there, I guess, but mostly it's a really dark show. Yeah, I was ready for jokes, and then very first 15 minutes, that girl just gets literally explodes when she's run through by a speedster. It's unbelievable.
Man, if only...
But it's really good. It's some of the best writing that I've ever seen. And I say that confidently. The writing is like, the whole storyline is so tight and so good. The characters are so well fleshed out and just so well done that it was really, really impressive. There's one scene, I'm not going to spoil it, obviously. If any of you are listening and you have seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Episode 4, there's a scene that occurs in an airplane, and that is the hardest scene I have ever had to watch in anything. In any TV show, in any movie, anything. I mean, my jaw was dropped. I was in disbelief. And I've seen 13 Reasons Why. I've seen things that should not be on television at all.
Yeah, like that's as dark gets.
I know that's like what shouldn't happen at all in the first place. But it's not a situation with 13 Reasons Why where it's like you shouldn't have ever filmed this in the first place. It's just so hard to watch because, and I'm trying not to spoil it, but because you know these characters and the decisions that are made in this scene, and it is gut wrenching. It was made me physically feel sick. I was in shock. I tweeted about it like directly after. I was like, the scene in the airplane. Oh my god. So if you're watching The Boys, if you're thinking about watching it, go watch it. I'm telling you, Raymond, right now, go watch it. You will really like it.
See, when you say like that, I'm just like, damn, I really wish like DC and like Marvel could do some stuff like. I mean, I know we got Deadpool and we got Logan, but I mean, like, you know how it's just the Flash can like vibrate through stuff. I'm like, I would love to see like the Reverse Flashes speed through somebody's body and just like implode them. Like, I was like, damn, that's crazy.
Yeah. Definitely go watch it. If you're gonna watch it, I will tell you, beware of episode 4. Good Lord. That was so hard to watch. But the whole season as a whole is really, really well done. 10 out of 10 recommend. And I can't wait for the second season. They have already started work on it. It got greenlit before the first season even released. It's that good. It's it's spectacular. So that's one of my things that I've been watching recently. Raymond, what's something you've seen in the past 2 weeks?
So I started watching Euphoria. I am 3 episodes in, and I'm hooked, man. Like, I have to go to my friend's house to watch it just because I don't have HBO. So I'm always just over there like, yo, is it cool if we watch Euphoria today? And they're just like, yeah, they love it so much. They're just like, yeah, we're going to rewatch it again. Like,
really?
This show is just like, I grew up on like Degrassi. And it's basically, if Degrassi had a really good, basically everything cranked up was better. Like, if Degrassi had like good cinematography, good music, and real acting, then that you have Euphoria. And like, I forgot which generation of like kids it's supposed to be on, like generation like X or Z, something like that. But I don't know.
I think it's Z.
Yeah, Z. And
I mean, I haven't seen Euphoria, but Gen Z is the one that is currently happening.
Like in high school. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like
correct.
For me, it's just like watching it being older. I'm just kind of like, wow, that's crazy that kids are going through this, because there are some things that go on in the show that I'm like, you know, that's not too far off the things that I've seen happen to like kids that are like younger than us. You know, I'm just like, wow, like that's kind of scary. And then the fact that these things that people who are younger than us get to see shows like this about themselves is kind of like, wow, that's really what's going on. I don't know, I feel like the show is just very aware of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's something I really appreciate about it. It doesn't really sugarcoat anything. There are moments of it that are just like, what in the world? And I mean, wow. I will say, at least in the first 3 episodes, because Zendaya is the narrator, like it is still like her story for the most part, but it is kind of like a 13 Reasons Why, where it's about these groups of kids and then their individual lives and their individual stories. So that part I like a lot, just because you do get to see a lot more than just her story, and it doesn't rely on her. And it really is one of those shows where it's like, oh, I can have a favorite character outside of the main character. But each of their stories is just so interesting up to this point, at least. I know I'm really early in, but it's really good. And then, of course, all the music is like overseen by Drake. And the playlist for that show is so good. Like, I'll actually sit through the credits just to jam to that last song. But I will say, the acting in it is also pretty good. I remember I've
heard the music is really good.
Yeah, the music is
going
really
back
good.
to your other point. I've heard that the music is spectacular.
And then the acting is really good too. There's one dude in there. I forgot what the actor's name is, but someone out there, one of like the bigger graphic designers, graphic artists, fan casted him as Nightwing, and I was like, I could really see that. Well, first of all, the dude's huge. Like, I
Yeah.
swear he could be at the NBA. That dude is huge, but he's a good actor. And I'm just like, and he has this like really stone cold intensity to him. And I'm just like, oh man, like that's cool. Like I like that. And then
Yeah.
the other characters in the show, yeah, the one thing I can really just say about it is that it's so grounded. Like it just feels like these are real things that happen to people in this type of community. You know what I mean? Like that are in that surrounding, and it's just like I appreciate that a lot. I don't, I don't know. I'm really excited to see where it goes, but as of this point, yeah, I definitely recommend it to anybody. I'm like, go watch the show. You're gonna enjoy it.
It's actually next on my list to watch. It's one that I've been meaning to get around, but I ended up watching The Boys first. I do how, and obviously I haven't seen the whole thing, but how, as far into it as you are, how do you feel about Zendaya in it? Because I asked this because I've seen her only in a couple things, here and there, and then obviously when I was a kid, I watched her Disney show Shake It Up. So I mean, you don't expect stellar acting there, but also in like the Spider-Man movies, I've seen her in, and like I like Zendaya. I like Zendaya a lot, but I've never been like wowed by her acting. Not saying she's a
No,
bad actor. I
definitely,
just
yeah.
haven't really seen her full range. So do you think I've heard that she's really, really good?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a spoiler to say that yeah, her character is very emotionally changed and like I guess just like what's the word I'm looking for? Not traumatized, but you get it's I don't know, she's just very emotionally distraught, I guess is the best way to put it. And she goes through a lot of personal things that I'm just like it's kind of hard to portray that on screen without overdoing it. Without being, oh wow, this person's just like an edge lord, and it's just like no, she's
Yeah.
really pulling that off so far. I have yet to see a scene. Maybe there's one that I'm just like, wow, that was pretty good, and like it really got me to like feel for her character. Maybe there was like one, but aside from that, yeah, there's yet to be a really big scene from her where I'm just like, wow. But I know, like, I still believe that just because I'm so early in, that's just why I haven't seen it yet. But I know it's gonna come. Like, but I agree with you though. I have yet to see anything amazing like from Zendaya acting wise. Like I saw her in The Greatest Showman, yeah, Shake It Up, and that or on Disney Channel, and then I saw her in, of course, the Spider-Man movies. And I mean, it's not like in Spider-Man they gave her any large emotional range to work with.
Right, right. There hasn't been a whole lot, to work with. That's why I say I just haven't seen her full range. I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully not. I've heard that, and I don't know. I think I saw like a clip. It wasn't like a spoilery clip, otherwise I would have been upset. But I think I saw like a clip from one of the last episodes of Euphoria where people were like raving about her performance, and I don't know. I thought it was like good, but I didn't know the context of it. So that changes things, obviously.
I know, I saw
But
that too, and I was just like, what are you guys talking about? Like, does the
yeah,
scene you're
yeah,
referring to happen before or after that, or is this just something that happens in passing that you guys are
yeah.
like, oh, that's cool?
Well, and context has a lot to do with it. So when I do get around to watching it, hopefully will be soon. I'll know what they're talking about, and so
No,
will you. So
definitely. Yeah, exactly. All right, but your turn. What else have you been watching?
oh man, so this one's not so much of a good thing. I wanted it to be, but a couple days ago, I went to the movies for the first time in a while. Honestly, well, in a while. I got really really busy, but I went to the movies for the first time in a while, and I saw Good Boys, the comedy. I don't know it's been marketed everywhere. I feel like I feel like I have seen it everywhere, and the marketing has been really good for it. It's basically kind of like Booksmart, where it's like these kids go on an adventure to do something, and it's similar to that in the story elements. But this is about three middle school age boys. They're in sixth grade, and they are kind of going through changes. They hit on topics of puberty, kind of like Big Mouth does, a little bit like that. But basically, they go on this long quest to learn how to kiss a girl, essentially,
What?
so that one of the three boys can kiss a girl at this party. Because in sixth grade, that's what you care about. So like, yeah, I think the premise is fine. And the jokes were pretty funny. in the trailers. So that's why I was excited for it. I had a friend of mine on Twitter talk about it, and he said it was really, really good. And I normally, he's, those people that you meet and you have like almost the exact same opinions as them in like all movies. I don't know if you've met someone like that. That's this guy to me. So he tweeted really, really good things about it, and I was like, all right, I'm probably going to like it. Like, we agree on almost everything. And I hated it. I wanted to like it. Yeah, I really did. But I genuinely, and I say this sadly, but I think it's the worst movie I've seen in 2019.
Damn, that's crazy.
I know, and I didn't want to dislike it. I wanted it to be funny because I really did enjoy the trailers, and I thought it had some promising aspects. My problem with the trailers that I was worried about was that they had shown all the good laughs in the trailers.
Oh, it's one of those.
Well, and when you see trailers for something and you see different trailers, different TV spots, and you get to the point where you're like, I've seen so many settings. Like one trailer, they're at a playground, and one trailer, they are doing this funny thing where they run across a highway, and then in one trailer, they are doing this thing where they are, and I'm literally talking about the trailers of this movie, but in one trailer, they're looking up what porn is and stuff like that, and you see all these different trailers and TV spots to where you've seen so many settings, and you're like, I wonder, like, how many settings in this movie can there be?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and all of them have a different funny joke, and they're all really funny, but then you think about it, and you're like, I've seen so many different jokes in so many different settings that I feel like I've seen all of the funny scenes in the movie, and I got around to it, and that was true.
Oh man, that's rough.
I was pretty let down by it. A lot of people really liked it. If you liked it, that's wonderful. For me, it really wasn't for me. I thought the child acting was not great. There was one of them that I thought was pretty good, but the other two out of the little trio I didn't think were very good. I think they had no chemistry. I think that was something. The lack of chemistry between these three kids was pretty prevalent to me. I really didn't think that was good. And I thought it's really hard for me to describe, but I sat there and I was really bored. It was the closest I've gotten to leaving the theater mid-movie this year.
That's the worst. When a comedy is supposed to be funny and you're bored. Like,
right. I was sitting there and I was like, I don't care about these characters, and they're not even funny, Like, it's not even like a comedy that has a bad story but good jokes. It's just, for me personally, it's a bad story and they're bad jokes for the most part, other than a couple good ones. And I will say it picks up in the third act in the last 20 minutes ish.
Yeah,
like the end of the third act. It picks up pretty good. It tells a really valuable lesson, I think, at the end. And I won't say, because of this may spoil the movie. So I won't say, but essentially at the end of the movie, the three main characters, they end up in different places than they started. And it tells a really valuable lesson that I definitely related to, because it kind of hits on a theme of, like, you can grow apart from people while still being friends. You can have the conversation where you say, listen, we're becoming different people and we need to be who we are, but that doesn't mean that we have to completely ignore one another. We just won't be as active in each other's lives. And that's kind of the lesson that it teaches at the end of the movie. And I really did enjoy that. I wanted the whole movie to be as good as the last 20 minutes, because the last 20 minutes were very touching, and I really did enjoy that part. But when I looked at the movie as a whole, I was like, everything else was so bad for me. And I kind of can relate it to Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
In that sense. Listen, I got this. So basically, a lot of people like to say that Episode 3 is their very favorite of Star Wars. I think that's a popular one that people like to say is their favorite. Or they like to say it's the only good prequel, or that it's one of the best Star Wars. I won't get into this. We'll probably talk more about this in December with Rise of Skywalker. But I disagree with that sentiment. I think the third act of episode 3 is maybe the best third act out of the entire Star Wars, like all of the movies in general. Like that third act
saga.
is spectacular. Yeah, the entire saga. That's the word. Obviously, like that third act is spectacular. It's got the best lightsaber fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and that's so good. But if you look at it, the first 2 acts of that movie are the same old, same old. It's the same stuff that you got in Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, and that stuff is not stuff that you want. You know, those
bad.
2 movies are not. They're not great. Yeah, they're not very good. And I think the first 2 acts of Revenge of the Sith are the exact same. Although the third act really picks it up and is really spectacular, the first 2 still don't. The first 2 hold it back, is what I'm saying.
Man, that's just the worst.
And that's how I feel about Good Boys. Is like that last 20 minutes, really good, really heartwarming, and I felt something. I could have felt more though, if I cared about the characters, but I didn't care about the characters because of everything leading up to it was so disappointing to me, you know? So
No, I feel it.
Another thing is it's directed, I don't know his name, but it's directed by a first-time director, and that showed a lot. Yeah. And, you know, that's not a problem that it shows, but you can just see the inexperience in the way that certain lines are delivered, certain direction the actors have been given, or just certain ways scenes were shot, or the editing, all of it kind of, you know, it shows that it's kind of a first-timer's job. And obviously I'm not one to correct any of that. I've never directed a film, but I will say that much of it showed. And, you know, I wanted to like it, but turns out that I didn't. If you've seen Good Boys and you liked it, that's great for you. But personally for me, not my thing.
Fair enough.
So, that being said, what's the last thing that you've seen recently? We'll spend a little bit more time on this one.
So for me, the last thing I've recently seen is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. Wow. I mean, yeah, I know you saw it, and we talked about it a little bit, but now that I've finally seen it, we can have our full discussion. But yeah, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it was pretty good. Like I gave it a solid 8.5, almost 9. I was like, oh yeah, this is a pretty good movie. I just felt like it dragged for a good little while, and I was like, damn, I mean, or here's my thing. Maybe I just gave it a hall pass just because I was like, it's Tarantino, I believe. You know, in the end, something's gonna happen that makes sense, and it did. But
right.
But going through the first 2 acts was kind of like, all right, these scenes are great and they're well acted. How do they fit together? You know, and then I feel like if you don't know the story of Sharon Tate, then a lot of it feels that way. You know what I mean? It doesn't have the same weight as it should if you don't know the real life story of Sharon Tate. But yeah, and so for me, when I finally was like, you know what, I should probably go look that up. You know, so then when I looked it up after the movie, seriously, as I got into my car, I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. And that kind of gave it a full point for me. I was like, oh, okay, cool. But as always, I mean, the writing's great, the acting's great. When you have a star-studded cast like that, you know, it's gonna be awesome. Even the little characters, they had Austin Butler in there. I was like, no way, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. But overall, I really enjoyed it.
I agree with you on the issue. And before I get more into this, in the next 20 minutes or so, we're gonna get into spoilers for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You've been warned. But
it's been 3 weeks though. I mean,
you've had time. If you were gonna see it, you've probably seen it already. If you haven't, go do it. But I will say I agree that where the movie lacks is in that second act. There's a stretch of time where you're like, okay, where are we going? You know, and it's like, okay, here we are, and we're just going through the motions, but nothing is progressing. You know. But
no, definitely,
I do think in that slower moment, you do get a lot of character building stuff. You know what I mean? So something I really like about Avengers Endgame, for example, is those first 2 acts. Really, the first act really the first act is pretty slow. You know, it's not very fast paced, but it's a good slow where you get a lot of character moments and really character driven, you know, storytelling, to where that third act is much more rewarding because of the character moments that you had at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, that it feels like a much more rewarding conclusion because of all the slow driven stuff in the first couple acts. That's the way I feel about Endgame. And I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood kind of does the same thing, where you do have that moment where you're like, okay, what's happening here? Like, are we going anywhere? You know, the plot doesn't necessarily progress, but the characters definitely get a little bit more fleshed out, and you kind of see who they are more. Mm-hmm. And that benefits you at the end of the day, because I mean, good Lord, that last scene, that whole finale.
That was brutal. Like, that was just gruesome.
Wow. That was so good. But before we talk about that finale, I do want to note one thing that I really, really liked. I'd seen before the movie, someone tweeted something out that was like, there's one scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that is genuinely one of the best scenes I've ever seen in film. After watching the movie, I know that that's the last scene, because it's so, I mean, just chaotic and crazy and awesome to watch, you know?
It's not even just that. I feel like the payoff for the characters is just so rewarding.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, especially for Brad Pitt's character, Cliff.
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, that was such a rewarding finish for him.
Yeah. I will say that while I was watching the movie, I was waiting for this one scene, because I knew, you know, if it had that impact on somebody else to where they tweeted like, that was the best scene I've ever seen, I was like, okay, I'm gonna feel this. I'm gonna know when this happens. You know, it's one of those things. Yeah. And originally, I thought when this scene was happening, I was like, is it this scene? I thought it was the scene where Cliff goes to the ranch.
Oh, that was a good one too. Yeah.
The Manson family is. That was a scene where I mean, the way that scene was directed was brilliant, because although there wasn't a whole lot of dialogue, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, oh my God, what is going to happen? I didn't know if they were going to, like, I thought they were going to kill him. Not going to lie.
I don't know. For me, I was like, there's no way it ends that way for him right here in the middle of this movie. Like, I was like,
I didn't think so either, but I was also like, oh my gosh, I'm scared for him. Like, I'm very much on the edge of my seat, because I knew, like, he's surrounded by all these people who are literally a family of murderers, you know?
Yeah.
And I was on the edge of my seat. They kept the suspense alive really well in that scene.
No, like, the subtle, like, Charlie Manson drops, like, when she's like, Charlie would love you. I was like, oh my God. I was like, dude, turn around. Like, please leave.
Creepy. Yeah. Like, the whole time I was like, go away. Don't stay. Please.
Yeah, I love that buildup of his character, just because, you know, in the beginning, it's like we get that little, he killed his wife and got away with it. And then Leo's just like, do you really believe that? And he's like, because I don't. And then, of course, you get that little flashback scene of Cliff and his wife, and they're on the boat, right? And she's like, just verbally assaulting him. He's just sitting there drinking his beer, and then we never get at that again. I'm like, oh Jesus! So that's like kind of the mystery of where we're at now. Is he did he kill his wife? Or
right? And I really liked the way that was set up, because it cut away before he did anything.
Yeah.
So it lets you decide. You don't know
exactly.
You know?
And then like, what do you call it? So that's why when we have this story of him meeting that hitchhiker, you know, who's part of like the Manson family. Like, I just thought that it was interesting, because it really made you think about, where is this going next? Because if the story is, this guy's a dude who killed his wife and got away with it, is he gonna murder this hitchhiker? Is that where we're going with Brad Pitt's character? And so for it to twist around like that, I was just I was in awe. I was like, wow, I did not see that coming. That was a pleasant surprise. And I really thought, he was going to die in the end there. And I was like, oh man, that's such an unrewarding death for his character. But no, it was great.
Yeah,
I mean, the fact that he's just there whooping ass, like, I was like, oh, you go, man.
Right. I thought he was dead in that last scene. I was like, oh man, because he's like, you know, he was tripping on acid and everything. And I was like, these people are coming to kill him. And he's like tripping. There's no way that he'll be able to fight him off. And I was really on the edge of my seat. And that scene as well, obviously, that's probably the best scene in the whole movie.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, like he's dead. He's got to be dead. There's no way he makes it. But it was really rewarding payoff for sure. He was the funniest part of the movie.
I thought he was the best
gave
part
life
of
to the movie.
Yeah, like that was
the
his
best
show, and it's weird to say that with Leonardo DiCaprio right next to him.
Right, but he was spectacular. I really really liked him. I will say one of my favorite things was at the end when Rick Dalton, Leo's character, comes out, and I thought he was dead too, right? Mm-hmm. Because he's in the pool, and I was like, one of these guys is gonna die. Like, it's their last night together. It just, like, it seems like it's set up that way, so one of them dies, you know? Mm-hmm. And he's in the pool, he's got his headphones on, he doesn't see anybody coming. I was like, this is it. Like, he's done. There's no way that he doesn't get snuck up on and killed, you know?
Yeah.
But then for him to bring out the flamethrower.
To torch the girl? Yeah.
Yeah. That was, I mean, it was brutal to watch. Very, very violent, but also, like, it was so good. It was very rewarding. I was laughing pretty hard.
I just love how something so wild, out of context, fits so perfectly into the story because of a subtle little drop in the beginning of the movie where he's like, oh yeah, I took like 6 months of flamethrower classes just for this role.
He was like, that's the stunt he did himself, so he knew how to do that, and he still had it.
Yeah, so just for that to come back at the end, I was like, wow, that's a really good callback. But I definitely do think that all three of their stories are just so rewarding because of the whole, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And then for me, I've just felt like, okay, with Sharon Tate, right? I just felt that, you know, how her story ends in real life. Obviously, she's tragically murdered, and that sucks. That really sucks, especially for someone who was, you know, beginning a new life, you know, having this career, well, hopefully having, you know, a new
blossoming
career.
Hollywood star.
Yeah, and then I felt like that's what this movie was really about. It's just like, in a perfect world almost. That's why it's a once upon a time, just because she got to at least live it out, and she didn't obviously get murdered. And I thought that was really interesting for her character, to say the least. And then for Rick Dalton, his character, I love that he goes, from beginning to end, he changes. In the beginning, he pulls up into his driveway, you know, he's finished, and he's just like, that's Roman Polanski that lives right next to me. If I could just be in one of his movies, that's my career is going to skyrocket again, and I'm going to become famous again. You know, if I could just be in one of his pictures, and he doesn't even know that I live next door to him. And then at the end, he's walking up to Sharon Tate's gate, and they're like, oh, do you want to come inside? Are you okay? I was like, wow. And it's literally just like that. You know, in one crazy night, after he feels like, I'm finished, you know, this is it for me. I'm done. I can't even afford to keep my best friend with me anymore. And it just felt like, in a perfect world, this is what happens. You know, you get that one Hail Mary chance. And then, of course, for me, I think, like I said, the most rewarding character payoff was definitely Cliff. Just because it does suck. Like, it did really suck to see him being so nice to Rick just because he's a good friend, and that's just the kind of person he is. And then, of course, for everyone to hate him, you know, for everyone to be like, oh, I don't want him on set because I hate the energy that he brings. He killed his wife and he got away with it. And in the end, of course, I came away with, I don't really think he killed his wife. I feel like just for me, there's nothing in there that the script gives us to support he really killed his wife, aside from people saying he killed his wife. Because the truth is, like, rumors spread every day, and the truth is your dream can die just like that because of a rumor of what might not even be true. You know what I mean? And then it's like that's a reality that people face today, and I'm sure back then it was worse because you couldn't prove anything to be true or false, you know, just because now it feels like everything's recorded, but that's neither here nor there. But for Cliff to do all these nice things, it was really rewarding to see at the end. The truth is, he was really just a good dude, and he was really just a good friend. And I felt that the way, it's funny because his character doesn't change. You know what I mean? Kind of like how Captain America, like, he's the same really good guy from beginning to the end. And it's just like, for
Yeah.
Cliff, I felt like, yeah, that's what he was. He was his story was it was the script trying to show us, no, he's a bad guy, and for us to question that, but for him to prove to us, the audience, in the end, that he is good, just by being able to save their lives and do all this stuff. And of course, yeah, he did get the best one-liners. Of course, I think my favorite one was, he's like, oh, I know you, I remember. He's like, what's your name again? I'm the devil, here to do the devil's work. No, it's something stupider than that. I was like,
yeah.
I was like, oh
yeah.
man, that's just great writing. But
yeah,
I mean, Tarantino with his scripts, it's just amazing. I mean, he always does a good job.
My favorite. This was one of my favorite lines I heard in any movie this year. Mm-hmm. It was at the very end when Rick is getting invited up to their house, and this got the biggest laugh out of my theater, and the biggest laugh out of me. It was a big belly laugh, and he's like talking on the speaker to Sharon, who's in the house.
Yeah,
and they're like inviting him up and stuff, and he tells them, yeah, these hippies came over and they tried to kill us, but everything went crazy. We had to get my friend picked up with an ambulance, and somebody or they're like, well, is everyone okay? And Rick goes, well, not the hippies, they're not for sure. And I was like, oh my gosh, I died laughing when he said that. It was just it's a simple joke, but it's so funny. It was so funny because it was especially after, like, he literally just torched this girl, and he was like, well, she's not okay. Like, after he burned her alive. But yeah, I think it was really good. One other thing that I do want to talk about that I appreciate, a lot of people in today's culture, you've got this whole, like, quote unquote cancel culture going on.
Yeah. No, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, and I no one was trying to quote unquote cancel Tarantino for this, but Bruce Lee's daughter came out and was like, I don't like the way my dad was represented, or the way my dad was portrayed in Tarantino's movie, because he was portrayed as rude and stuff. And Tarantino, instead of backing down and giving like a half-hearted apology, like most people would, most celebrities do,
No.
He said, well, Bruce Lee was not a nice person. And that's like basically all he said was like, you know what? He wasn't a nice person. Like, he was rude and cocky and arrogant. So I made him rude, cocky, and arrogant. And I understand the concern. Like, if you're his daughter, obviously, like, you're going to be like upset about it.
Yeah, no one wants to see their dad portrayed like that.
Right. But I also liked the way Tarantino was like, I portrayed him the way he was. I'm not going to apologize for that. You know what I mean? So that was something I just want to give credit to Tarantino for that, because I think that attitude and that the stand your ground mentality is kind of being lost in some instances with this whole quote unquote cancel culture going on, where people are trying to cancel people for things that maybe, are not as big of a deal as society can make them out to be sometimes. So I appreciated that from Tarantino. But yeah,
no, definitely. When I saw that scene, I was just kind of like, wow. I didn't really know how to feel about it at first, but then after a while, I got through it, and I was just like, that's a little bit. I was like, that's not too bad, honestly. That's not the craziest thing.
No, no, it could have been much worse.
I'm pretty sure that's like in 100 years, that's gonna be the equivalent of people when he's gone. The king. It's gonna be like if someone were to put this fake LeBron in a movie and be like, and have LeBron talking shit like, oh yeah, I could have beat Michael Jordan 1-on-1. It's the same thing. It's just like, it's not that big of a deal, and I don't know. It's just, it really wasn't that big of a deal. And the only other final thought I have is, what did you think about all the feet in the movie? At first I didn't see it. Yeah, and then it kept happening, and I was like, I refuse to believe it's for any other reason than a storytelling purpose. I know it's in here for something, and I just still can't think of it. I'm like, no, there has to be a reason.
I don't think it had anything to do with the story. I don't want to touch on it too much, but there was a lot. And
there were a lot of feet, man. I was like, what in the world?
Like, I felt like I had read like months ago, maybe even like years ago, that like Tarantino has a foot fetish or whatever, but I had forgotten that by the time I was in the theater watching this, and I noticed in the movie I was like, there are a lot of just feet shots,
Yeah,
where they're, and it was more than if there was like half the amount, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. You know what I mean?
exactly. But it was
I feel
really
like that's more
in
normal, but it
there.
was just very obvious and often. So that was a little off-putting and weird, but whatever. Overall, I think the movie was one of the better movies of 2019. I had
Oh
a
yeah.
really good time with it.
No, I definitely think
Um,
it's one of my more favorite Tarantino movies. Like, it's not the favorite. I wouldn't even put it at number two, but it's definitely in there somewhere. It's pretty. I liked it a lot.
yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. That being said, let's transition into our last segment of today's episode. Doesn't really have anything to do with what we've been talking about, but it was an idea we had that we wanted to do this episode. So we are going to not rank, forgive me. We're going to list 5 movies that we believe are above a 5-star rating. So basically, 5 movies that are in their own legendary tier that you feel like 5 stars is simply not enough for these movies. These, by no means does this mean that they are our top 5 movies of all time. They're just 5 movies that we really, really like and think that we...
They go above and beyond just what you
Yes,
expect out
yes.
of a film, where they just change the game.
Right. They're more than 5 stars. So, that being said, Raymond, I'll let you go first.
All right, so my first one is Her from Spike Jonze. I mean, this movie, I feel like it checks all the boxes. Like, you have to think about, set design, sound, editing, acting, directing, screenplay, every cinematography. It checks all those boxes with a 5-star rating. But I think for me, the one thing that really puts this in like that transcendent level of movies is Hoyt van Hoytema's cinematography in this movie. I mean, the colors they use, I can't explain it. It really, if they had used even a brighter red for his shirt, I already feel like the movie just wouldn't have felt tonally as concise. And I don't know, just this movie is just so interesting because it really is like almost one person for the core of the movie, and one real person and a voice in his head almost. And I feel, yeah, and it was just the movie for me is just, it deserves more than 5 stars. And I chose 5 movies with that checked all the boxes, and then each one excelled in its own category. And yeah, the cinematography in this movie is just so amazing because not only does each shot fit the tone and the change of the lens, like I can tell he's using a lot of like telephoto lenses, something with a really long range, just because you can feel that compression, feel how he's so close to everything, especially in that city, and he's getting this nice bokeh in all these lights. And I don't know, it's one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen, and I feel like it's one of those movies where you could literally pause it at any moment, and it's like a work of art in itself.
Yeah.
But that's my first one, is Her from Spike Jonze.
So, going along kind of what you just said, my first one that I want to talk about is James Cameron's Avatar. Ooh. A lot of people, I know, I'm one of the few that remembers and loves this movie. I think this movie's stellar, and the main thing that I love about it is the visuals. Kind of like you were saying, the cinematography in this movie is beautiful. It was groundbreaking in a way that we hadn't seen since Star Wars in 1977. I mean, this movie ushered in a new age of visual effects with the motion capture technology that was developed for this movie. So, and obviously we've seen that implemented in so many ways since then. I mean, you look at Thanos. Thanos doesn't happen if Avatar doesn't happen.
No, that's very true. Yeah.
And Avatar, even though it was in 2008, that CGI holds up, all of it. even though it was the first of its kind and it was brand new, it holds up and it's still good. And that's something that is touted about Star Wars a lot. 1977 Star Wars is like that CGI, even though it's so old, it still looks very real and it holds up. And you look at CGI of The Incredible Hulk, that also released in 2008. That did not hold up.
Oh no, that was terrible.
That CGI is bad, straight up bad. So looking at a movie like Avatar, the fact that it was so revolutionary and so bold for its time, the fact that it still holds up despite all of that is really impressive. And beyond that, I really like the characters. I think they're really fleshed out very well. Pandora is this whole world, and it's very immersive in a way that rarely do I feel like a movie truly immerses me into the world of their characters and into a setting. And part of that is because of James Horner's score for the movie. It's one of the most beautiful scores that I've heard, and just the way that they use the music is really, really well throughout the movie. But Pandora as a world, I absolutely love, and I feel like I'm there when I'm watching the movie. So Avatar is my first one that I want to talk about. What's your number two?
I will give Avatar a lot of crap just because, the papyrus font for their logo and the fact that it's
they
really
changed
long.
that.
But I will say yes.
They have a new logo for the sequels that will eventually release.
But yes, I will say that the effects
Avatar
and the
2
CGI
coming
really hold
2045.
But my second pick is, I feel like I'm giving out my lifetime Oscars here. But but my next one is The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hardy. For me, I once again checked all the boxes. But for me, the thing that set this movie apart from at least all the other movies that I've seen was really the acting. Once again, it's one of those movies where it's carried by one actor for the most part in Leo, but the only thing is when it's not him, Tom Hardy really makes you hate him. There are very few villains. I didn't even like hate Thanos, because I'm like, oh, okay, it's Josh Brolin, in this pink suit or in this CGI, but oh my god, I really hated Tom Hardy in this movie. I could just thinking about him in this role, and sometimes I'm like, damn, I really hated you in this movie. And the fact that he does it so subtly, it's like he plays this role where he's such a douche without being over the top. He's not dogging on anybody, he's not insulting anybody, he's just really mean. And he does it so well. And then, of course, for Leonardo DiCaprio, I mean, he put his all into this role, which is obviously why I got him the Oscar, finally. And I haven't seen Blood Diamond or The Aviator. I think those are the only two of his movies that I haven't seen. But yeah, for me, it's one of those things where less is more. And he had less to do here because he wasn't talking for half the movie. But he did so much with it and to show that emotional range. And then at the end, I felt like what really just put it over the top was how he goes from this rage monster who's broken inside after his son dies to just he's finally at peace when he accepts that revenge isn't in his hands. And I don't know, I just thought that was really it's a really valuable lesson. But two, we just don't see performances like that every day. It's in there with Heath Ledger. It's in there with with Raging Bull or with Robert De Niro. It's one of those legendary performances that I'm just like, wow. If I had to think about the best acting performance that I've seen, it's Leo's in The Revenant. But yeah, that's why it's up there. The acting just really sells you. If it wasn't for those two, I do feel like this movie would be really boring.
Yeah. My number two is a movie I actually watched today. Or not my number two. We're not ranking. We're listing. My second one is a movie I watched today. It's Pixar's Up.
Oh, wow. No, that's a good one.
It's easily forgettable, almost, I think.
Really?
I think it's a movie that... Well, it's not forgettable, but for me, when I think of Pixar movies, I don't think of Up.
Mm-hmm.
Or when I think of Disney movies, I don't think of Up. I forget about its existence every now and then, and when I'm reminded of it, I get very happy because I loved this movie when it came out, and I watched it today. I've actually watched it a couple times this year, so I guess I don't forget about it as much as I did, but I forgot about it for a couple years after it released, and I watched it today, and I absolutely love it. I think it's such a tight script. It's a short movie. It's only an hour and 30 minutes, so it's a quick watch. You can get through it pretty quick, but it's still so good. I mean, the way that the characters of Carl and Russell are written, it's spectacular. They're they're such good characters to where when you reach that conclusion and you're at the end and they've gone down this whole adventure, whatever, and Russell is getting his final badge and Carl shows up when Russell's dad doesn't, and Carl shows up, and instead of giving him the assisting the elderly badge, he gives him the Ellie badge, and he pins the grape soda pin on his sash. I mean, I was in tears. I was crying. I mean, I always am, but like I was crying watching that because these characters are so well written that you know how much it means for Carl to give that away. One, because you know how much Ellie means to him, and you know how much Russell just wants that last badge, and he's enamored when he gets the Ellie badge because like that's one that no other kid has. So it's such a cool thing for him to have, and it's just a very touching conclusion to see. And the whole movie. I mean, the fact that it's for most movies that are only an hour and 30 minutes, I would be like, yeah, that could have been longer and it would have made it better. But with this one, no, it's perfect the way it is. I have no problems with it. Definitely goes above and beyond, but above and beyond, no pun intended. But I know I'm really funny today. Anyways, moving on. What's your third one?
My third pick was La La Land. I always rewatch this movie just because I love it that much. But I feel like it is one of those movies where it's like, yeah, the script is really tight. Everything happens there for a reason, and every scene makes the next scene happen. But I'm not a giant musical person, but this is one of the few musicals that I'm like, wow, I really love this movie. Just because every song, not only is every song just good, you know, as its own song, but in the context of the story, whenever each of those songs plays, it really just feels like they're singing their script. I mean, I can't think of another movie where the score and the soundtrack match so perfectly to the story they're telling. And I mean, we've seen some really great musicals. There's Rent, Moulin Rouge, West Side Story, Singing in the Rain. But for me, it's just none of the music in those movies fits so perfectly to the story they're trying to tell in La La Land. And then, of course, just for the fact that it's in LA and the way they use their practical sets, you know, and in the story they're telling, it's almost fitting. And it's one of those things where it's like the production of the movie and the style of the production matches what the movie is trying to tell you. Yeah, it matches this idea of these old things like jazz coming back and still being successful if you believe in it. And of course, that's what LA's about, right? I mean, it's the city of dreams, right? It's where these things happen. But yeah, for me, La La Land is just, it goes above and beyond in that aspect. Just, I mean, I know it won the Oscar for it, but still, it goes beyond that. It's just, I've never seen or heard a musical score and a musical soundtrack that fits so well and so perfectly, and that just, you can really just tell the story through the soundtrack by listening to it. And I don't know, that's something I just enjoy about it. But that's my third pick. What is yours?
My third pick is a movie that I try to rewatch often because it's one of those that the first time I saw it, I was just in utter and complete shock at what I had just witnessed. It's one of those. It's Interstellar.
Oh, hey.
I love Interstellar. I could watch that movie over and over again. I mean, it's pretty long. I'll say that.
Oh, no, that is a long movie, yes.
But I don't think it detracts from the movie. There is a moment in the movie where you're like, wow, this is a long movie. But you're not, for me at least, when I think that, I'm not complaining. I'm just thinking, this is pretty long, but I'm having fun with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but that movie, the way that it's very unique. in its storytelling. It came out around a time when space movies were happening often. You had Interstellar, you had Gravity, you had The Martian, and that's just a couple that were happening in just a span of just a few years, and it came out on top. I'll say that, for me at least. I mean, McConaughey's performance is one of the best I've seen. The way that the movie ties itself up in the end, with McConaughey being the one that's banging on the bookshelf through this other dimension, trying to communicate with Murph. Like, oh, it's hard to watch that happen. And
that's a tearjerker.
I like the way that I like the way the movie feels like it's real, even though it's not. Like, you watch movies like Star Wars, right? That's a space epic. Or you watch movies like, Guardians of the Galaxy. These are space movies, but that this isn't something that's actually happening in the universe. Interstellar very much feels like something that could happen in 100, 200, 300 years, And the way that they ground it in realism throughout the entire thing is really interesting. And I have done a little bit of research, not a whole lot, but a little bit, on black holes and the way that they portray the black hole, although that's one of the biggest mysteries of humanity, is we don't know much about the black hole, and it's very fascinating to me. I could talk about it for a long time, but basically the black hole, like, we don't know a whole lot about what it is or what it looks like. Obviously, we had like that first picture come out of a black hole ever this year.
And it looked like the one from Interstellar.
Yes, and it looked like that. So, and it's interesting because in Interstellar, I know they did a ton of research on it, and basically they came up with this image of what a black hole should look like based on everything that we know, which is not a lot. But they came up with this image of what a black hole should look like. And basically, when they released that first image, although it's pretty blurry and whatever, I mean, that's pretty much what it looks like in Interstellar. So I like how, although the movie is obviously fiction and obviously things that cannot happen in the year 2019, it does feel like, what? In 100, 200 years, we don't know how humanity is going to progress or digress. And it feels like this is where, like, this kind of stuff is possible, like deep space travel, the planet where every hour is 7 years on Earth, like things like that. And the black hole, the whole thing with the black hole, it all very much feels like, what, this could happen in the future. It's not like a Guardians of the Galaxy situation where you're just having fun and this stuff isn't real, talking raccoon, that's not going to happen, But this stuff, it's like, what, like, this is realistic for the year, I don't know when it's set, but this is realistic for the year 2500, like
Exactly.
Maybe. Who knows?
Who knows, man? We haven't raided Area 51 yet. For all we know, that spaceship could be down there.
September 1st, I think that's going down. I won't be there.
I won't be there. I value my life, but if that does happen, I really want to know. Like, tell me, bring me a souvenir, man. Like, I want to know what happens down there.
If enough soccer moms and Florida men show up,
oh jeez,
I may come, because I feel like that would be the best protection we could get.
Yo, don't forget the Naruto runners, though.
Yeah, well, if they're Naruto running in, if you get a bunch of Florida men Naruto running into Area 51...
Oh, we're unstoppable at that point.
There's no weaponry that can stop them. I think Florida men are the greatest power in the universe.
Oh, yeah, no, they are unmatched. I mean, I don't
Thanos
think Goku...
stands no
They got
no
nothing
chance.
on them.
Superman, no. Florida men can withstand anything. Anyways, what's your number 4?
My next pick.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Yeah.
My next pick was also a Christopher Nolan movie, but it was Inception. I actually chose... It's funny, I left Interstellar off my list just because I was thinking about it, and I was like, as much as I'd put it here, I feel like I talk about Interstellar a lot, but I'm glad you brought it up. I was like, oh, okay, cool, so I don't have to say it, but I can add in another one. But I picked Inception just because, for me, that's another one where it's like the storytelling in there is just insane. Kind of like how we talked about at the end with Murph and Coop being the one to put the message in her watch. He's like, she'll get it. I know she will. For me, that was
Yeah.
Inception when he washes up on the beach, and you're just like, oh, okay, so he washed up on the beach. Here he goes. What just happened? And then for it to circle back in the end, and especially for them to have that. I love that Nolan does this thing where I feel like he just has these like moments of dialogue that are just like you call back to it, beginning and end, kind of like
Yeah.
the do not go into that good into the night thing from Interstellar, and then
Yeah.
what do you call it for Inception? It is the it's like why are you here? He's like so we could return back as old men together, and I was like, oh wow, like that really tied back around like perfectly, but that is a movie where I was just like the storytelling and the story itself was so complex, but yet the way they tell it makes it seem so simple. It's like we're gonna go inside this dude's dream to go and then I'm gonna bring you guys with me so I can go into his dream again and then again and then again just to plant the idea, and then we're gonna jump back out, and then by the time he wakes up, it'll only have been like a 14-hour plane ride and everything will be okay. But I just love the sense of urgency for such a long movie. It really is another movie about stretching time. Just because he has to obviously finish this mission before the plane lands, or else he's screwed, and then he'll never see his family again. And that's what his goal is, right? To go see his family. But of course, every time he jumps into another dream, his time gets a little longer. When in reality, it's not really changing. But it's still, and even though the movie is what feels like an eternity long, it puts you on the edge of your seat every time they jump into another dream, because you're like, then what? But then, of course, I think the one thing about the story that really gets to me is just one quote from there that just sticks with me. It's like an idea is like a virus. It's contagious. Like, once it's really deep in there, it's just going to spread. And I thought that was, one, a really valuable life lesson, and two, that just really captures the essence of the movie in one line. And that line comes pretty early, and you just don't know it yet. So I don't know. I think it's little things like that. That storytelling, of course, once again, it checks all the boxes. But when I think of movies that are just really different and really just outdo other movies, it really is Inception. Just because, wow, I mean, it's just the story there. It's just so rich. It's just so full, and it's so tight, but it's so long. It's crazy. But what is your fourth pick?
My fourth pick is a movie that I watched yesterday. It is the movie that made me fall in love with movies, The Dark Knight, another Christopher Nolan movie.
Oh, man. 3 Nolan movies in a row.
I'm not done either. But The Dark Knight is, what can I say that hasn't already been said?
Yeah.
Heath Ledger's performance is the best I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Period. When he is in a scene, you pay attention. It's so captivating. It's shocking to me because when I was in middle school and high school, I would watch this movie almost every month. Like, I made it a point. I was like, have I watched The Dark Knight this September? Nope, gonna watch it. I watched it so often because I loved it and I was so into it. And mainly it was because of the Joker. I love the Joker as a character, and I love Heath Ledger's performance. And watching it last night, I watched it, and it was the first time that I had watched it in maybe over a year. So it had been a long time since I'd watched this movie, and the longest I've gone since I first watched it. And so it was fresh for me in a way that it hasn't been in the past. And I just noticed that every time Heath Ledger came on the screen, I was paying attention. And it wasn't even Heath Ledger's back on. It was like, what's going to happen next? Even though I already know what's going to happen, I was still like, I need to see this performance. It's just one of those things, and it's truly spectacular. But yeah, The Dark Knight, I can't say much that hasn't already been said. It's just in a league of its own.
I don't know,
so,
it gives you chills, man.
Yeah. What is your last one?
So my last one, I really had to reach into the bag and think, what is, really, in my opinion, the greatest movie of all time? And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me just because a lot of people think this is a really boring movie. But 2001, A Space Odyssey from Stanley Kubrick. This movie, the first time I watched it, I think I was in film school. And I was saying, they're like, okay, we're going to watch this movie. And I looked at the runtime before class started, and I was like, dude, this movie takes forever. Oh, my God. But then as soon as you hear the first intro, like the ba da 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 da, I was just like, oh, my God, this is epic. And then we get into it. And then, of course, it kind of bounces around for a while. And you're just like, okay, I'm lost. Like, I was turned off. I was like, I'm so confused. What is happening? And then once Hal comes on the screen, the talking robot thing, that's when it starts to get interesting, because I'm like, this robot sounds very creepy. But then, without going too into it, with the story of how it all loops back in a way where the story, you don't even understand it at first, because I feel like that's what it is. It's about trying to take a meaning out of a story that you don't completely understand, because isn't that really just life? We don't understand it fully, because it's like Interstellar, the only things we understand are that can transcend dimensions of time and space is love. It's one of those things where it's like, there are just so few things in the world that we can comprehend. And I felt like with 2001, that's kind of what it gives you. It's like this wild trip that just brings you from beginning to end over and over. And then at the end, you kind of see this dude experiencing that all within 10 minutes. And not only that, the cinematography in this movie for releasing in 1968 was amazing. It was just like, especially when he's like going through that like wormhole thing, and all the lights are going over him. I'm just like, what is going on? Like, I can't believe they made that movie in 1968. And for me, that's just what sets it apart. It's a story that doesn't tell a story and forces you to really pull something out of it, and it gets you to think. And I think that it's really powerful that it sticks with you that way. But that is my greatest movie, the one that's like in the highest league of everything, is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah. Well, my last one is not so much, I don't think it's the greatest movie of all time by any means, but it is another one of those movies that I think is in a league of its own. And a lot of people don't. I think it hasn't aged well for a lot of people, but it's aged perfectly for me. It's The Dark Knight Rises, another Christopher Nolan movie. I love The Dark Knight Rises. I think it is just a hair below The Dark Knight. And when I say a hair, I mean it is so close. The reason I love The Dark Knight Rises, though, is not because of a certain character's portrayal, although I do think that this is Christian Bale's best effort as Bruce Wayne, and I do think that this is I think Tom Hardy is spectacular as Bane. I love his Bane. I love Bane as a villain in this movie, but I don't think that I love this movie because of any of those performances. I love it because of the story. I think the story is so well written, and Bruce Wayne's arc in particular, from being hobbled, literally unable to walk without a cane, and just literally being a hermit. Not like Batman has retired, he has disappeared, and then when he comes back, you see, and they drop everything that they're chasing Bane, the police are, and they drop everything. They're like, I'm gonna be the one that catches Batman or whatever, and obviously they don't, but it goes through this tale where it's like, oh, Batman's back and everybody hates him because he killed Harvey Dent, even though we know he didn't, and all this stuff. And then you go through Bruce Wayne, and he goes to the prison, and then he's tricked by the girl who's, I can't even remember her name. What is her name? Do you remember her name?
Talia al Ghul.
Yes, Talia.
Yeah.
How could I forget? He's tricked by Talia and all this stuff, and it ties into Batman Begins, and at the end of the day, like, Talia was the bad guy, and I really love I love his arc throughout the whole film, how he's literally broken in the beginning, and he's broken in the middle when he's literally has his spine broken by Bane.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Which I love that they brought that from the comics, but you hear the crack when he brings him down. And Bane, while the Joker is crazy, obviously, and fun to watch, Bane has a leg up on the Joker in one area, in that Bane feels very much like he's unstoppable.
Oh, God, yeah.
When you watch this movie, you're like, how does Batman beat this guy? Like, this guy can't be beat. And the best villains give you that feeling. So, or most of the best villains, I will say, give you that feeling, because Bane definitely gives me that more than. I'd have to think about it, but he definitely gives me that feeling more than I think any villain I've seen in a movie. But I would have to think about that a little bit. But he really does give you that feeling where he's like, this guy is not going to be beat. And that's something that I love about his villain, is that you feel this sense of hopelessness for Batman. Like, when he's broken, you feel like he's not going to get back up. And if he does, you don't know how he's going to survive, you know? And I love the plot twist at the end where he takes the ship and the ship blows up with the nuke and everything. And then it turns out that he actually moved to Paris and all this and got a happy ending and all that. I love that so much. You know, you think he's dead, but the autopilot was actually fixed long ago and all this stuff. I just really like that conclusion. I think the story in this movie is spectacular. So yeah, that's my fifth movie that I think is in a league of its own. Yeah, one of my favorites for sure.
I think one thing we can conclude from this is that Christopher Nolan deserves a lot more credit than he gets.
Christopher Nolan is the man, for sure. I need to see more of his movies. I haven't actually seen all of them, but I need to get on that.
Yeah, there's not a single one that I'm going to say is bad. All of his movies are amazing.
Yeah. This has been Post Credit. Thank you for listening. If you want to check us out on Twitter, you can follow me at Preston C. Moore or Raymond at Rvinya. That's RVINYAH. You can also follow the website that we both work on at The Cinema Spot, or thecinemasPot.com. That is a website that we both put a lot of work into and we're very proud of. But have any questions, reach out to us on Twitter. We'd love to talk to you guys. Or reach out to The Cinema Spot. That being said, thank you guys for listening to Post Credit. We'll be back next week at our regular time on Monday, not Tuesday like this week, but we will be back on Monday next week with some more content for you guys. But thank you for listening. If you liked this, make sure that you give it a like or a thumbs up or a 5-star rating or whatever counts as a like on whatever you're listening on, be it Spotify, Apple Music, whatever. But thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, y'all. See you next week.